to the Mindset Michelle TV show again. And we're so super excited to have you joining us today for more excellent suggestions, advice, and examples around how you too can create a successful mindset. Today's extra special guest is Peter Strohkorb. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
It's so fabulous to have you on the show. And I've known Peter for many, many years now and followed his journey quite closely. And he's been running Peter Strohkorb Advisory for a number of years now. And when I think of sales, I think of Peter. And I also think of sales and Peter because he approaches it in such a different way to many other people I know that work in the similar sorts of space around sales. But I don't want to say too much about Peter because he's got so much wealth and experience around sales that I'd like him to explain a little bit more about who he is and how he came to be so passionate about sales. So Peter, explain a little bit about your background.
Love to, Michelle. Thank you for asking the question. Look, I spent more than 20 years in the corporate world working for a very large multinational organization, both Japanese and American and Australian. And during that whole time, it ended up being, it was always a rat race. There was politics going on. There was pressure from above and pressure from below. And I didn't really enjoy the experience that much, I have to say. And I also found that there must be a better way to sell than those big cookie cutter machine conveyor belt systems. And that's why I then looked at not how do we want to sell, but how do buyers want to buy? And we've all heard of the buyer's journey and how we need to align selling with the buyer's journey. But we talk about it, we don't really do it, do we? We still focus on what we're selling and how we want to sell it and how we want to measure the progress in the sales stages and the gates and all that sort of thing. And the buyer ends up almost being a bit of an afterthought, you know, in some people's minds. Plus we then have the goal of the end of the month, the end of the quarter, the end of the year in mind and quick, you know, close the deal. There's pressure from above to close the deal. We then pass the pressure on and the pressure in the end ends up with the prospect or with the buyer, and they don't want to be pressured anymore. So what I've discovered, and many others have probably discovered as well, is that during the pandemic, we had so many other problems to think about, like personal problems, professional problems, job problems, health problems, mental and physical, and our mind was full of worry and concern. And the last thing we wanted is to be ambushed by some an anonymous sales rep to ambush us with the sales pitch, whether it's, you know, spamming on email or cold calling. And often the cold callers have no idea whether you're even in the market for the thing that they're selling. They're just fishing. And the other one that I love is pitch slapping on LinkedIn. Pitch slapping is when somebody reaches out to you and says, "Oh, Michelle, we have some contacts in common. Let's connect." And you go, "Yeah, okay, I'll connect with them." And bang, they hit you up with a sales pitch. So that's pitch slapping, you know, and it happens all the time, and it's really ugly, and it actually ruins the sales game for everybody else because we stop responding to those messages. We don't take those emails. We hit the spam button. We don't answer numbers that we don't recognize on our phones anymore, and we disconnect from people, or we don't even connect with people in the first place on LinkedIn. So this way of selling is actually ruining the game for everybody else. And I want to tell you something else that I'm a bit passionate about, and that is, do you know when the original sales funnel concept was invented? Have a guess.
1800s.
Very good. Not many people said 1950s, 1940s. It was 1898, and it was an American that invented it. And the reason that it worked then is that all the knowledge, the product knowledge, was with the seller. And so the buyer had to go to a seller to inform themselves about, you know, what could they buy, what were their choices, how much would it cost, and so on. So the power of the sale actually was with the seller at the time. Well, guess what? In the last 120 years since 1898, we've had a little thing called the internet. And people now go out and they inform themselves, and they want to reach out to a salesperson only when they feel comfortable and confident enough to actually have a sales conversation with somebody. And a lot of the times they're so ready to making a purchasing decision, that all they want to talk about is price, really, right? But which then means as a seller, we don't want to come across as a salesperson who just handles a transaction. What we actually want to do now, and what buyers expect from us now, is that we help them to make an informed buying decision. So I'll say this again because it's super important. We help them to make an informed buying decision. They want to talk to a subject matter expert who can help them, not somebody who jams something down their throat that we want to sell. So the whole thing is now predicated on helping the buyer to buy from us as opposed to selling to them. And when you look at the way that sales has been handled over the last 120 years, it's all about top-down, seller in control of the sale, even though they're not really. And what I've done now is I've actually turned it around and said, what does that sales process look like from the buyer's perspective? Yeah, how can we make ourselves attractive to the buyer at every step of the sales funnel, from the very top to the middle to the bottom, and help them to make an informed buying decision to buy from us?
Wow, Peter, I can really hear that passion and the depth that you've actually thought this through in a way that, like I said at the beginning, I haven't met other people that have really so passionately looked at and thought at, well, what is the role of the buyer in this? What is the role of the seller in this? How has that evolved and changed over time? And also, and this is why I'm so excited about this conversation today, because it's also that change in the mindset, like you're explaining. People previously, they needed to be sold to because they didn't have that information, but now everybody has all the information everywhere. And so I can hear your passion. I can see how you've thought it through so wonderfully in such depth. I'm more interested now in asking the question about you. And so what is it in terms of having all this understanding and working in this space where it's funny because sales and success is making that sale. You know, success means to a salesperson making the next sale, the next sale, the next sale. But for you as a person and you with your advisory business, what is it that success means to you? How do you look at success?
Okay, so we've got to differentiate, of course, between business success and personal success. So let's just be clear, we're talking about personal success right now. And to me, you know, as a business owner and founder, I find myself spending all the time thinking about the business and how can it be improved and what could I do better and so on. And the family sometimes becomes a bit of an afterthought. Particularly because I've got 3 teenagers as well who drive me crazy, but that's a different story. But you know, every now and then my wife says we need to go on a holiday to gel again as a family because everybody's in their own room and on their own device, and COVID sort of contributed to that. So what does success look like? Is for me, there's it's a bit like Maslow's pyramid. You know, you got the basics and then you got the luxury items at the top. So for me, firstly, you want to have financial security, so that you can actually not worry about shelter and food and all those basic things. Then you want to have probably enough financial security so that you can do the things that you like to do when you like to do them. You know, remember how we used to go to overseas holidays? You know, so that was the thing. That was the thing that we would like to do, and we did it, right? But then, of course, there comes the personal fulfillment and the happiness that you get from relationships, of course, as well as personal successes and following your passion and succeeding in that.
And I love how, because Maslow and the hierarchy is something I've mentioned a few times on the show, and it's great to bring it up again because without money as that starting point, then yes, many people. It's not to be silly about it. If you don't have money, then that very much focuses in on what you need to be doing and what success is to at that point in time. But for many people, once you start to have that money and other things, I really hear that, you know, with COVID and with busier lives and with technology and teenagers, that all equates to the quality of the relationships and the quality of the time spent with people, so that even if you're physically together, everybody's not on some sort of device. And so that might look like, and for a lot of Australian families, it looked like holidays overseas and spending time together. And COVID and all of the rethinking around that has kind of, again, helped people to really focus in on the quality of the relationships that they have. And I think that that's a lovely way to then go into with your specialist expertise around sales, which is so much around understanding the mindset of the buyer, the seller, the process, the journey, you know, when people are at objection stages, etc. What are some of the suggestions then for creating your own personal mindset for success that you would like to share with people today?
Okay. So for me personally, I've always enjoyed teaching. I was never a school teacher or anything, but I used to be a corporate trainer, and I've always enjoyed conveying information to other people and seeing light bulbs going off and that sort of thing. So I'm somebody who is naturally predisposed to helping people and to helping them to understand and opening their minds to new ideas. So that's just me as a person. From a mindset perspective, particularly in sales, we always get told you got to be resilient, you got to have thick skin, and you got to not care about the knockbacks and all that sort of thing, which is all true. But if you have a mindset of I'm helping the buyer to buy, as opposed to how can I jam stuff down their throat, that is really a big change in mindset. And it's a change for the better, both for the buyer as well as for the seller, because selling won't feel like selling. And for the buyer, it won't feel like they're being sold to, it feels like they're being informed. So my advice to all salespeople is stop thinking about what you're selling and how you want to sell it and how you measure about selling it. Think about the buyer and how you can help them to buy, obviously from you. Now, one other thing that comes into it is that if you know that they're not an ideal customer for you, and if you know that they're maybe not quite ready for your thing, or maybe that they can't afford you or anything, don't burn the bridge and say, look, bugger off and come back when you've got some money. Just say, look, my advice to you is this, this, and this, and come back when you're ready or when you have that, when the circumstances are better. So keep in touch with them in a way that makes them go, wow, this guy or this person gave me a piece of good advice last time. I might just go back to them again this time around, now that I'm ready to buy something else. So doing the right thing by the buyer is actually a very good piece of advice and a good piece of mindset as well.
And I really, again, hear about, in a sense, putting yourself into the buyer and the seller's psychology about what they're looking for and what might best support them. And those steps around, instead of getting caught up, in a sense, in the technical side of what the product is and what my KPIs are around selling that product, but keeping in mind, well, what's the best solution for people? I know, especially in the technology space where I've done quite a lot of work, one of the fascinating things there is that there is so much focus on the technology as a solution and so little focus on what actual problems it's solving. And in the sales space, when I do speak to salespeople, the more advanced ones are always talking about what problem is that solving. So if I take that to a wider perspective, whether you're in sales or whatever you're doing in a business or in your job in a company, keeping that mindset around, well, what problem am I solving? What problem am I helping people with? I think is a really important one, because it then opens you up to be able to hear what those problems are, hear what people are sharing, as opposed to being caught up in the technical, the specifics about what you're wanting to share. You're then kind of sharing a little bit of information, but then pausing to hear what the problem is that you're solving. And I think that that's a really great point that you raised there.
Thank you. And I always say that when you think about the problem is not, oh, I haven't hit my sales target. you want to understand what the problem is for the buyer. And the other important thing is that I teach all my clients is that think about it from solving their business problem, so creating a business case for them to buy from you. But also, if you can understand and identify the personal problems and consequences that need creates in them, and you can help them solve and overcome that as well, then they have a reason to buy from you from a logical and rational perspective, as well as from an emotional perspective. And that's a much stronger attractor than just a business case alone.
And that's a great point, because in much of what the world you and I work in, it's doing business cases and helping clients with business cases. And a lot of the time, one of the things that they struggle the most with is exactly that, around the emotional side of things and the personal side of things. So I'm explaining and helping people to, put in how this can benefit you, how this can help you. And it's funny because the most simplest way to explain it is to say to people, you have to look at it in terms of what's in it for them, and then add that into that business case or into the picture, into the information that you're sharing, so that it's really clearly spelt out and really straightforward and easy for them to understand. And the mindset part that I like of that is that you're again putting yourself in that other person's shoes for those moments to come up with, well, if I was them, what is it that I'm looking for? What is it that I need? And what is not just my outward problem, but my inward problem? And Maslow's hierarchy is great for that, because is my problem that I need to keep my job? And so I need to find the best solution that benefit cost around those decisions means that my fear levels are much higher than if it's just, an add-on to my work, as opposed to, is my job going to stay or not?
Yeah, and if you can solve a personal problem or a personal challenge as well, then the decision to say yes becomes much easier for your buyer, right? And I just came from a workshop I was running for an IT organization, and we talked about the different ideal customer personas that they want to address. And we said, well, what makes them tick? What motivates them? And in a lot of cases, no matter whether you're at the senior level or middle management or further down the ladder, personal recognition is a big motivator. So if my solution can make you look good, and your boss will come to you and pat you on the shoulder and say, you've done a great job, that's, ooh, I'm going to buy that solution, right? So my advice to salespeople is to be mindful of not just the logical side of the sale, but also the personal and emotional side, and helping the buyer to look good in the process.
And not just for sales again, but I think for anyone in this space, hearing that these mindset tools and techniques around looking at whoever you are, whether you're in a job or in your own business, how can you help the person that you're working with look good, so that they then feel good and get a good result, but also that feeling part of it. And I know many people watching will also be maybe small business owners or medium-sized business owners. And the thing that you constantly hear from people from those areas is that they just feel so uncomfortable doing sales, because they feel like they're really pushing people, even if they don't want to be, but they feel like they're pushing people into buying their products or services. So what sort of mindset tools or suggestions you would have for people that might not necessarily feel like they're very good at selling, or they don't like to sell?
Well, Michele, most entrepreneurs, most business owners have not come from a sales background. They're very good at inventing a product or a service and taking that to market and running a business, but selling is quite something unnatural to them, and they don't feel comfortable about it. I had this the opportunity to work with a engineering firm just before the pandemic, and all the engineers said that they love their job, they love the specs, they love answering questions, they love talking about the technology, nuts and bolts and everything, but they felt deeply uncomfortable selling. And yet there were pre-sales people that had to sell, their job was to sell, but they didn't like it. So in the workshop, I asked them first, when I say salesperson to you, what images does that conjure up in your head? And they came up with the usual, dirty, filthy, sleazy, cheating bastards, and all these negative connotations about selling. I then asked them, how do they feel about helping? And they said, oh, helping is okay. We love helping people. Yeah, absolutely. And I said, well, what if you changed your mindset from thinking, oh my God, I'm talking like one of these sleazy, dirty, cheating salespeople. I'm a used car salesman or a, whatever, to no, I'm the expert. I know about this stuff. My buyer does not know about this stuff. How can I convey enough information to them to make an informed decision to buy what we're selling? Because in the end, you want them to buy not from somebody else, you want them to buy from you. So if we help them to make an informed buying decision, they're more likely to buy from us, because we almost become this now cliche term, trusted advisor. But it's really true, because if they trust what you're saying and they believe you, and let's face it, that engineers are highly trustworthy. They have one of the highest trust parameters in the world. So if an engineer says something, it's something different to when a salesperson says something in the buyer's mind. So what worked for these engineers was that to change their mindset from, oh my God, I've got to sell, to, oh, I've got an opportunity to help somebody to buy. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking, isn't that funny, the similarities to many of the women entrepreneurs and business owners, and even senior executives that we work with, where it's a similar kind of issue around, we might frame it around personal branding or selling, products or services within the organisation. But it's that same element of, if you aren't telling an organisation or other people about your products or services, other people will be. So having that mindset shift from, you're not selling to them, you're actually educating them. And
there's one other thing, Michele, though.
Yeah.
And that is, there's the mindset of the seller, but then there's also the mindset of the buyer. And I find with my Australian clients that they often have a mindset that, oh no, I don't want to be told that I'm doing something wrong. And if I feel uncomfortable with somebody saying, I can help you, when they go, that's a weakness. If I need help or that makes me look bad, I don't want help. I find that my American clients are slightly different, think slightly differently about this by saying, there's always room for learning. I don't know what I don't know, and I'm open to new ideas. So in Australia, we've got this mindset that, oh my God, I don't want to be told that I don't know something, because that might make me look bad. And in America, they go, well, tell me what I don't know. I want to know. So when we talk about mindset, there's the mindset of the seller, like helping, not selling, but also there's the mindset of the buyer. I'm open to new ideas, or my mind is closed and I don't want to know.
I think that's a wonderful reflection on if we think about that mindset of the buyer, definitely. I was reflecting before we started the interview about how in Australia, it seems like we've been restructuring organisations, for forever. I mean, at the moment, it's all about technology restructure, but before then it was all reorganising, etc. So one of the funny things about the buyer of, new technology, for example, today, is that technology may mean that most of the people lose their jobs. So that identifying problems and what solutions will solve those problems, I think there is a very different reaction, I agree, from people in Australia that might go, well, I might lose my job from this, as opposed to many overseas, not just American clients that we deal with, who go, well, I might lose my job, but I'll get another job somewhere that will be a better job because I'm really good at what I do. So there's not, I guess, that sense of certainty and confidence, which again is a very big cultural thing here in Australia. We're not as much trained, it's a different conversation, but we don't have as much training in promoting ourselves and selling ourselves, or sharing ourselves and what we can do, as many other cultures are. And that then gets fed back into that confidence. And very rightly, as you're pointing out, the mindset then of the buyer here, where if you're pointing out, well, we can solve these problems, but from the buyer's mindset, it might be, well, I don't want my boss to know that that's a problem.
Exactly right.
Apparently, he'll go, oh, it's your problem, it's your watch. So as opposed to, oh, thank you for sharing. This is a problem with us, and we can now act on it, and we can solve this problem and not become a Kodak company or whatever company. So yeah, these really interesting insights into how to share that you are open to people buying your services and your products and your whatever, and also then that difference in mindset between different countries. And I'd say also, as you correctly pointed out at the beginning, around, I call it in Australia especially, disaster fatigue.
Right.
So with the floods, the fires, and then COVID, we have these kind of underlying factors now where there's so much disaster fatigue. Many people are just exhausted and overwhelmed.
Yeah,
and
that's actually a very good point. So I actually don't like talking about problems because that makes people think about problems. Well, it does, doesn't it? And
it does.
I'd like to paint a vision of the future, what the end state would look like, and then get them to imagine what would happen to them personally in that world, in that new
utopian
that new future, right? Because it's too easy to get bogged down on problems. Oh my God, problems. But whereas if you paint a brighter future, then they go, I want that, and it's a natural human response.
It is, and that vision building, I think, is another. We could do another whole session around
Yes,
building that vision of success and the successful mindset for the future. And I think that, that's very clearly going to become a big part of shifting from that disaster fatigue that I described. People have lost sight of that vision, because there's always opportunities, there's always new ways of doing things, and there's always so much more that's open to people and what they can do and who they can become. And many have lost sight with some of the things that have been going on. Yeah. Peter, it's incredible. I mean, we could just keep talking about this mindset for success all day, but how can people get hold of you if they want to find out more?
Look, it's pretty hard to escape me. you can look me up at peterstrohkorb.com on the website. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's a YouTube channel. There's a Bright Talk channel. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. If you want to get to me, you can find me. Don't worry.
I love it. That's wonderful. And our final question for today, which is what I really love to ask people, is if you had some advice for your younger self, what would that advice be?
Good question. So I'm thinking back to my younger self, and I was probably, normally people would give themselves the advice and saying, don't worry about anything, be brave. But I actually was pretty brave thinking back. I ran my own business when I was still a teenager, and then sold it to my largest customer, and that sort of thing. So I was never not brave, but I've always thought that big business would be better than small business. And when after I sold my business, I actually worked for one of the multinationals. In fact, I started a job at Sony, and it was initially really exhilarating and exciting to work in a big business, but then the politics came into it, and I thought, really, I don't need that. And I worked for 3, 4, or 5 multinationals, and I've always found that the politics are terrible. And so my advice is stay out of politics.
That's really wonderful advice to your younger self there, and really very true, because again, if you think about Maslow and his hierarchy, it's about your own personal self-actualization. It's not about the drama and the intrigues going on around you. But once again, thank you so much for your time today, Peter, and for all of your incredible insights.
No, thank you, Michele, for having me. It was awesome being here and talking to you about all this stuff.
It's been wonderful. And thank you again to all of the viewers who week in, week out come and watch this incredible opportunity to hear from so many different experts in their fields around what they think is a successful formula for building that mindset for success. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.